Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. AI is definitely the hot topic, not only in FII, but also in every boardroom around the world, and in media even more so. We've had AI in process automation and in various guises for a long time in the sector, but generative AI has really exploded in terms of potential for content creation. We're at an age where we're creating content with a click of a keyboard without much prior experience in theory needed. So how does this change the media sector? How does this change the meaning of content creation, of creators themselves? And how does this change the economics and the ecosystem? We've got a great panel that we'll introduce you to shortly, but we wanted to take you first through a few, just a very high-level trends and some stats. My name is Karim Sarkis. I'm a partner with Strategy and take care of entertainment and media, and my co-moderator is Roy Hinsey, who is a partner in the deals team of PWC.
Good morning and welcome everyone. So, as Karim mentioned, there's the generative AI trend and is exploding across multiple sectors, including media. These are just a number of stats that reflect this, and I just want to touch on a couple of them. So obviously we're seeing a lot of new tools and solutions that through just text prompts allow you to develop presentations, through to developing videos, brand, logos, etc. There are also a lot of investment happening in startups. Multiple startups are coming through on a regular basis, and we have one of those startups on the panel today. Governments are also investing in the infrastructure. Case in point is the Kingdom has invested or bought 3,000 chips to support in AI advancements. And finally, in terms of adoption, you have a lot of companies in the region, 84% plus, that consider that AI is one of their top priorities today. The AI market, or Gen AI market, is expected to grow at around 35% within the next 7-8 years to hit $100+ billion globally. This growth is driven really by two things. Number one is the advancements in technology that are accelerating at a very fast pace, but also the demand from users that are looking for personalized digital content across multiple industries. This growth, the $100 billion or so in around 2030, is driven across a number of sectors. Obviously, media and entertainment, as well as gaming, is expected to represent about 35% of that. So a large player, a large sector that will be using Gen AI. The tech giants, we have two of those on the panel today, are investing heavily in this space. The structure of the deals differ, but generally they're looking at the startups in that space and looking to see how they can leverage that technology and development of that technology for their current business, but also for creating new businesses and new services. Karim?
All right. Okay, so AI is coming in at different levels. Right now, you're seeing the co-pilot concept, which is basically what we're calling AI augmentation, where the human being is still in control and still the primary means of productivity, but they're using AI tools alongside them to help them do their task. Then we go into AI automation, where AI is taking over some processes that are basically making it more efficient, cost-saving, faster, etc. And then we're going to get to a point where AI is at core, where AI really, the product development, we're not there yet, but it's a point where AI is the product and leading the product development aspect and becoming the core essence of what a company does. Now, today, when people talk about AI, it's about efficiency, 126% more projects per week for a developer, 30% more automation of repetitive tasks, etc., etc. These are the sort of the not so exciting parts, but actually the good parts for the bottom line in terms of efficiency, speed, and being able to do more with less or with the same people that you have. But where AI is going is it's changing the nature of content creation. You might have seen some of these examples in video, for example. There's an AI film festival, right, that happens now once a year, and where basically all the clips on it are entirely created through AI. There's nobody involved except for the person who created the content. In gaming, you can now generate 3D assets just by describing what you want. You can generate worlds just by describing what you want. You can have characters that basically can have a personality and access a depth of knowledge as you're interacting with them as a player, as opposed to before where they were quite limited. In audio, you might have heard about the song with The Weeknd and Drake that was created by somebody who looks like a ghost with a ski mask on, but created quite a bit of a shock for the music industry. Actually charted within 24 hours of being placed on music platforms, and then was taken down as the industry quickly reacted to it. Writer, which we have the CEO of Writer with us, that's an example of a tool that's changing how content is being created by the enterprise, whether for marketing campaigns, but also for customer management, for knowledge management, and so on. And an image generation, of course, I don't need to tell you about how easy it is right now to create an image just, again, by describing what it is. So if we have all these tools progressing, how are we using them? What is a creator now, given that we've made it so easy to create content? This is an example of a very famous Chinese, I will not try to pronounce his name, a very famous Chinese sports presenter who in the World Cup basically couldn't keep up. So he created a version of himself using AI tools so that it could read the scores of all the different matches that were happening in the World Cup while he was doing other things or asleep. Reid Hoffman co-wrote a book with ChatGPT as an illustration of concept. I don't think it was a very good book, but it was a starting point. There's a very famous photography competition where the winning photo turned out to be entirely created by AI, and the person who created it won the prize and then rejected it on the basis, just to prove a point, on the basis that this was not created by a human photographer, I should not be worthy of this prize, to make a point. Kulthum was a very famous and long dead music artist in the Arab world. Somebody created a new song for her, and the immediate reaction was that she was banned from touring, but she died a long time ago. But this whole concept of a music artist continuing to be alive and producing content even after they're dead really changes. And you might have heard the podcast with Steve Jobs last year, of course, just based on past things that he'd said and using his voice. There are issues as well, of course. Mr. Beast, for anybody who has kids, will know who Mr. Beast is. Massive following, creator with a massive following on social media. There was a fake AI video going around, AI-generated video going around, that basically where he was promoting a scheme that he had nothing to do with. Same with Tom Hanks, trying to sell some dental product that he had nothing to do with. When you ask for images, because AI is built on scraping a lot of information that's out there on the internet, the biases in the data is there. So if you say, I want a construction worker, they're likely to not be white. If you say, I want a doctor, they're likely to be white. And so that's a big issue. The writer's strike in Hollywood, a key component of it was we don't want AI to replace us in the writing room. And then we have a lawsuit between Getty and Stability because they used Getty images to train the AI model. And sometimes when you're asking the AI for stuff, some version of the Getty watermark was actually making its way into the output. So interesting times. Lots of big questions. What's the future of content creation? What's going to happen to all the jobs in media? Are the giants of today going to remain the giants of tomorrow? Media companies were already struggling with their existence and their influence. And then how is the whole ecosystem going to change? And to discuss all of these questions, we have an amazing panel for you in alphabetical order of first name. Faris, and thank you for also sitting coincidentally in the right order. Faris Akkad is the regional director for Meta in MENA. May Habib is the CEO of Writer AI. And Simon Crownshaw is the worldwide lead for media and entertainment with Microsoft. And so with that, let's get straight into it and go into the questions.
Great. First question, Simon, is for you. So the current focus is on Gen AI, but AI has been around for a while and being used in process automation.
Yep.
So where do you see media companies deploying it going forward?
So I think from a process automation perspective, it's always been kind of like the holy grail from a media standpoint because everything has been so manual. There's too many people doing too many different things as part of that process. What we see today, whether I'm working on a studio or a broadcast location, a lot of it is around cognitive services, so localization, subbing, dubbing, voice translations. We're talking about instant summarization of content. To some degree, we've worked with studios like Wonder Studios, for example, where we're doing instant modifications from humans to AI-generated characters. Some of that stuff is still relatively science fiction, though, primarily because it's not media grade at this point in time. So a lot of the things we see are very easy applications, right? Using background images, based on text. Where we probably see more going forward from a automation perspective is also composable diffusion. And so typically what you even shared, Kareem, on the screen, right, was a little bit of like text to image type pieces, but now we're seeing text, image, audio, those things be all pulled together through different LLMs, and so to kind of create these new visual models and outputs that are being created. So from an automation perspective, a lot of this is really about speed, though, more than anything else. A lot of the stuff that media companies would like to create is being impacted by how long it would take them to do something. And so whether that be just using active archive components to go back and find out what was being used, whatever else it might be, they're making that available to users. So from an automation perspective, Gen AI sounds great, but I think we're seeing really simplistic, business-focused use cases that drive real output for people right now, where they've had limited resources to go forward.
Right. May, next one for you. Gen AI as a term is used as almost like an all-encompassing one, although I'm sure it's a little bit more complicated than that. How would you better define Gen AI in the context of process automation and the way it's used?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so much of employee fear associated with generative AI has driven some of the other language that I think is appropriate for it. Process automation, augmentation, transformation are all things that we're hearing be adopted by our enterprise customers to describe what it is that they're trying to achieve when introducing generative AI into an organization. And what we're really talking about is transformer-based models. Our models do text only, multimodally in terms of ingestion, but in terms of production. But transformer-like architectures underlie the code generation models as well as the text generation models. But coming up with language, funnily enough, by humans that more accurately represents what people are trying to do when they introduce generative AI, we are finding tends to better predict success and outcomes and adoption, because so much of this working is about people trying it and being the kind of creative source, employees being the creative source of the use cases that emerge.
Interesting. Faris, Meta has used AI now for a while, for some time now in advertising optimization. How will that change, or how will this technology change in terms of the ad creation steps, but also potentially the ad buying and ad targeting?
Yeah, look, it's our use of AI may be slightly different than the common use, which is very consumer facing. We have been leveraging AI to do a bunch of stuff. We actually had our earnings call yesterday, and probably the word AI was mentioned like 27 times. It's primarily to minimize advertiser friction. So we are in the business of small business. Most of about 2/3 of our revenue come from SMEs. And the ability for them to create an ad is not something that is very trivial. So they can do that with text commands, etc. We also do a lot of moderation using AI and machine learning because of the volume of content that we have to go through. We also use it to rely on less signals. So with the recent, well, not so recent now, iOS changes to provide more privacy to consumers, we had to figure out a way in which we can maintain the level of accuracy for ads while relying on fewer signals from consumers. And then finally, I think the ability to create an ad and allow the system to dynamically change that ad to maximize its efficacy in real time. So that you're doing a dental toothpaste ad and you're using, let's say, a cat or a dog, and it says, no, this graphic should use a hat, it's more effective, or sunglasses, and it dynamically changes that ad until it hits kind of that efficacy. I think really works very well with our type of audience, which might not necessarily, as a business, have the sophistication or the access to agencies, and so that bridges that gap for them to be able to operate at the same level of efficacy as a large business.
Yeah, very interesting.
Okay, excellent. I want to see this ad that has the cat and the...
That's usually when we use an example, yeah.
All right. Look, obviously, AI is everywhere in terms of different functions. When we think of it from a content creation perspective, Writer creates tools for enterprises for the marketing functions, among others. We're just starting, and it's already quite impressive of what these things can do. Are we headed to a scenario where basically AI is the author and we're just The audience?
It's a good question. I think a human storyteller and the premium on that is going to be something that we're all going to get a lot more intentional about, because we certainly are seeing especially fine-tuned kind of custom models inside of companies be able to achieve like on-brand content generation that is actually increasing conversion rates and increasing the kind of traffic generation rates versus what people were doing manually before. And so there's no question that marketing and digital is going to be utterly transformed with AI. But I don't think, though, Karim, that means that the storyteller will become AI. I think the stories that we know we want to tell, trivial examples, landing pages for SEO, like that's not someone, no one is daydreaming about growing up and being a writer who writes SEO, landing pages for SEO. Those storytelling that we really want to be doing as writers and as creatives, I think is going to just make up a bigger part of our day. So I agree, there are going to be elements of content that are, completely driven by machines. Our customers are there already. But to say that, AI becomes storyteller and, humans become audience, I think isn't going to be what happens. The human element, the premium on that goes way up.
So Simon, May believes in the human element will survive. If we think of it, that's from writing, if we think of it in terms of video, even when I look at this part of the world and what's been happening, in the past few years, there's been massive investments in studio infrastructure, in building out physical locations for shooting, and yet, just at the beginning of this journey, you can easily see where we get to a point where you can create an entire film or an entire TV episode just using AI tools. Are we going to get to a point where all this infrastructure and all these actors and cameramen and so on are unnecessary?
That's a really good question. So you're talking to someone who's also a storyteller who's worked on movies and other stuff, right? So I always agree with May, right, that the human element is incredibly important. But do I believe we're almost there? I think today, from short form content and other pieces, you could probably already do it. It's already here. Would large studios and broadcasters accept it? No, not yet, right, in terms of how they would market it, but is it easy to do? Yes, I think it requires massive amounts of infrastructure. It requires more game engine technology than you can imagine. Even most people think that's really easy to spin up, and it's not, right? It takes time at the edge to do that. I think, will we enhance storytelling with that process? We will. I think it's going to provide capacity and tools and creative elements that just don't exist today, right? I think I know so many creative people who look at the process today and who think that can be amazingly more effective with some of the new tools and technology that we've got. Do I think it's going to entirely replace it? No. I think the storytelling and the human element will always be the most critical piece to any of those components. But I know you're going to ask me about the writer's strike and stuff like that, right, in terms of where we are. I think there's a fundamental challenge, right, in the fact that the most traditional media companies and studios that exist today are based around the IP that they have, right? It's the most valuable currency they have. For them to stay away from technology and even to some degree continue with a strike like that, it will do irreparable harm. They need to solve it relatively quickly and get back to the table because it's the IP that drives their revenue long term. So I think it's an immensely exciting time. Do I think it's going to replace it? No, not quite. But we have to stay engaged to make it work.
If I brought you a $100 million investment in a studio complex, would you invest?
I would.
100 million is a movie, buddy. It's one movie.
Well,
maybe.
So I think, when I talk to all of the studio executives, right, one of the things we talk about is I want to make a $200 million movie, but only spend $100 million not making it, right? That's really what I want. That's really where I hear the conversation go. That's what it needs to become, right? Because the costs are exponentially high. It's almost an incredibly bad venture capital idea to go make movies in the first place. But I also argue that AI should prove out that there should never be another bad piece of content ever created if the data is used effectively, right? That's how I think about it.
Okay. All right, Faris. So Simon just said IP is the most important thing. On social media, we already see virtual influencers who aren't human beings. Maybe there's humans involved in the motion capture and so on behind what they do, but they're not real. Yet they have massive followings. We've seen virtual, in Korea, virtual music groups.
Yeah.
So if IP is the most amazing thing, and I can create virtual influencers, what's going to happen to the human influencers?
I mean, look, already there's estimate that somewhere around 30% of the influencers' action that you see is influenced by AI or entirely AI in some shape or form. There are some pluses to that. They show up on time and they're cheap, and it's basically your creativity is the limit. But I don't think it's before AI replaces humans, I think humans who do AI will replace humans who don't do AI. So all of the stuff that you're describing.
What time frame are we talking?
I mean, it's arguable. I think maybe 3 to 5 years, 10 years to be fully kind of a different mindset. Well, people also don't. When you see these case studies or examples of any of those examples that you show, to have an effective AI, let's say ChatGPT command, it needs to be a minimum of 300 to 400 words, your command. And most people today will say, summarize this book for me. Fine. But if you're trying to have quite a complex output, you need to paint a picture. You need to say, I am a male of this age group in this era, and all of that nuances the answer. So I think that requires a lot of skill and requires almost a different kind of coding. Then there's also the aspect of IP rights, which is when the protection of IP rights for ChatGPT is not the outcome. It's the command plus the outcome. Because the same command will generate different outcomes, and one outcome alone can be generated from a different command. So that combination is what creates your right to hold an IP right. So that kind of skills, from a legal standpoint, from a coding standpoint, is going to require a lot of development in the community. How you manage. So although it might solve, back to your question, from a creator standpoint, it might solve some problems. It's easier to manage in some ways. It's also very complex in other ways. Yes, your avatar is likely to stay on brand, is likely to kind of be on point with what you're asking them to do. But to get it to that point and to create that versatility and human-like type of interaction requires a lot of fine-tuning and constant tweaking. And that's a skill set by itself.
Okay, so we're going to shift to a point where the skill is not being the influencer, but in being able to create and manipulate the influencer in a way
or how you're able to kind of marry the two and interact with the influencer, right?
All right.
So May, let's touch on one of the issues that Kareem brought up, which is deepfakes. So obviously this is not a topic that only sits in the media space, but you have this issue in education as well, where people are using this technology to create essays and so on. Can we really, or how would we be able to differentiate between what's generated by AI and human writing?
So in the enterprise, folks love consistency. And so a lot of the customers we work with want AI to actually produce the same things that they have been writing, but in a more creative way, or for a different audience, or for a different channel. And so a lot of the downsides of AI, of being able to very quickly reproduce something that says exactly what you want it to say, or is very close to guidelines that you give it, those are features, not bugs in the enterprise. When it comes to the consumer market, we've got a public free tool that is used hundreds of thousands of times a day that detects AI writing. And you might ask, why is an AI writing company doing that? For our customers who are enterprises, we actually direct them to really make sure their employees know, if the AI detector is saying that what you're creating and writer is AI created, then you're doing it wrong. And so the ability for us to take everything from the little fingerprints of the ratio of nouns to articles, or how many personal details are there in a piece of writing, or how many quotes and statistics, what are the variations, right? We actually will make errors as human writers, and AI writing makes no errors. So the fact that we can identify AI writing is a fact. The fact that there are ways around it is also true. And for our enterprise customers, the creative stuff that they want to really like feel and sound like human, they are fine-tuning models. They are not doing zero-shot prompting. There is a human in the loop. There's a review process. And then even in the enterprise, there's an element of things that people want to be consistent, i.e. plagiarizing their own work, right? Things that they own, that's fine. But they want to be really consistent no matter who is writing it. So, I think going back to maybe even pre the panel, both Simon and Fed has touched on it. AI can solve a lot of AI's problems, and this is one of them on the deepfake technology. In our own business, the way that we built our AI detector is using large language models that we trained on AI writing to detect AI writing. So there is definitely meta usage here, no pun intended, with AI that I think is a compounding advantage to companies that think AI first, that make generative AI part of the competency of how they build applications and workflows. And even in the detection of AI, we're seeing that.
And continuing on this topic, Faris, media companies have been struggling with fake news for a while now, even before the onset of this technology. And as more content is pushed through, how can we tell the difference, right, with content that's being displayed on these different media platforms?
Yeah, I mean, look, the fake news concept, unfortunately, is as old as news itself, right? The volume and the ability to generate it and the ability to disseminate it has accelerated significantly. And to May's point, I think AI can help in a lot of those aspects. Today, what we do on combating fake news is we do, in addition to having our own tools, we work with journalists and journalism organizations as independent third parties that we flag pieces of content to, and then they use very traditional ways in going through them. We provide them with the tools, like if a picture is doctored, or image recognition, video recognition, etc., so they can go back to maybe the source if it's out of date, out of context. But ultimately, that human judgment call, especially on sophisticated issues, still sits. And so that expertise in journalism, people who might have worked for newspapers, etc., investigative journalists, is still very, very useful. It's the tools that you need to use to accelerate that process and keep up with the volume and sophistication of the counter side is I think what lies on us to provide and continue to innovate on. But the way we've combated fake news has always, the foundation of it still remains the same in terms of awareness, checking out the sources, checking out multiple sources, relying on reliable sources of news, etc.
As far as isn't the issue today that people don't do this? Yes, the organizations do this, but I can't tell you how many times I've received forwarded. This has been forwarded many times on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And we all, I know I could look at it and tell that it was nonsense, but
Yes.
the person sending it to me truly believed this was real content. So they've already taken the journalist out of the loop and are just forwarding this stuff.
No, look, that's a fair point. I think we're in a cusp of situation. I mentioned it yesterday in casual conversation. I remember a time when I was in undergrad where I went to the library, and there was a skill set to look up a book in the library. You had to figure out there's some sort of index, and you go, or those machines that take you back to look at old newspaper clippings, right? That's useless now. That skill set, you can probably park it. Like, you will never have to use it again. As we look at a new generation, especially let's look at the Middle East, where, according to economists, 88% of the young generation relies on social media as their primary source of news. You have to develop that skill set. I mean, in the region, we do have the skill set today where we look at news organizations with a nuance. Like if you want a full story, you look at this news organization, you look at that news organization, you kind of figure out the truth somewhere, or the version of it somewhere. I think the same level of sophistication needs to start happening as you engage with social media. And you find a lot of the younger generation is a lot more open to that point of view. They're open to looking at sources. The influencer marketing is one of them. Like people rely on influencers because they have this personal relationship. I'm not saying it's a risk-free journey, but it is part of a journey that we've embarked on, and we're not going back. We're not going back to a single source of news, and we're not going back to a single source of truth. What we have to rely on is facts that we as a platform and others have to provide the tools to be able to provide you with these raw facts. But then as a consumer that is susceptible to a plethora of inputs, you also have to become a more sophisticated user. And that's just an inevitable reality for all of us.
You have a lot more belief in the typical consumer than I do, but I hope you're right. Simon, so we're painting a positive picture of what AI is doing. We're still talking about the storyteller, about the human element, about a more sophisticated consumer. It's not how companies think, right? Companies need a better bottom line. So if I'm a CEO of a company and AI is going to let me fire some people because it can do the job or hire fewer of them, I'm going to do it because that's my duty towards my shareholders. So if I'm going to, I have a 10-year-old son. In a few years, I'm going to be supposedly giving him advice about what to do in college. Should I tell him to steer well clear of media? Or should I tell him to go and get some non-media skill because that's what's going to become useful in the world of AI?
So it's a good job that my son is 11 years old, so I'll talk to him too. Look, I think Faraz said it really well too, right? I think it's not those that are going to get replaced by AI, it's those who know how to work with it more than anything else, right? On the Microsoft side, it could be really salesy here and say, like, we have a Copilot piece, right? It's meant to be humans augmented by AI and all the rest of it, or working side by side. I've never been more excited about what's going on in media right now than anything else, right? Because if there's one thing in the media industry, I don't know anyone in the audience, right, in terms of what you do or what you focus on, right? But having built content, I've never had enough people. I've always been super slow. It's been fragmented. I've had to use vendors all over the place that I didn't really want to use, but I used them anyway because that's the only options that I had. And so I think for kids who are interested in media entertainment, right, you now have tools at your disposal that you will never have had in the past, right? You can do things you couldn't have done. I now have a suite of people that essentially are robots, whatever you want to call them, but they're doing the things that give me the writing, the operational pieces, the efficiency, the programmatic stuff that I couldn't do, right? And I'd have to hand that off to people that would get lost. I mean, if you think about a media industry today, right, how much of the assets or content are just lost, sitting on people's desktops and everything else, right, moved around, where it's not secure. And so there's a huge amount of roles left for people to be part of that process, right? But now I can just do it on a larger and far greater scale than I ever could before. So for your 10-year-old son, I'd be excited. I think this is the time to invest in that technology, right, and understanding it, using it differently. It's a little bit where, even at Microsoft, we're looking at the different types of skill sets that we need, not replacing people, just the different types of skills that they need to be effective in that industry, right? So computer science, yes.
Are you retraining the same people, or are you firing the old people and hiring new ones?
No, we offer obviously, if some people want to continue to do what they want to do, right, they can continue to do it at Microsoft, they can go somewhere else, but we're also looking to retrain those people to do things they've never done, right? And so, like for a computer science person, right? Well, we talked about prompt engineering here a little bit, right? Well, you don't need to be a computer scientist to write prompt engineering. You better be a really good English major, right? In terms of how you write, to figure that part out. So I think it's just different types of skills that people are going to need, right? And that's just an evolution of the industry in itself. I mean, so for me, I look at it every day and I go, I've never seen the rate of change in the last 8 to 10 months in our industry, just using AI all up. Some parts of the industry more so than others, right? I mean, so I love the term media, right? Because it can mean one thing to so many different people. But I just think the opportunities far outweigh the risks, right? And even the conversation about deepfakes and everything else, right? most of the media organizations would love to use AI technology and have people working side by side to protect the content that they're actually creating. So for me, I know the media industry is small in comparison to like finance, for example, but it's the most amazing creative industry that has an impact on so many people's lives, right, in terms of what we do. So for me, I would encourage my son, to do that. I don't think he wants to do it, but I think but I would encourage him.
And whether they listen or not is another story.
Yeah.
As you deploy Writer in the enterprise, what are you seeing the impact in terms of employee numbers? Are companies that are using your products adding people, keeping the same but doing more with them, or getting rid of people?
The headcount avoidance is absolutely a feature. It would be disingenuous to say that that's not a big factor. But what is happening to the transformation that's happening in the jobs, I think, is really interesting. When creativity is kind of like the new productivity, when you've increased the surface area of creativity that people can explore with tooling like Writer and others, people's jobs become a lot more fun. And so we are seeing, as folks survey users who have AI-enabled kind of workflows and folks who don't, a greater job satisfaction reported by people who are getting AI tooling as part of their day-to-day. I do think there is a creativity, to Feris's point, around coming up with use cases and reinventing workflows with AI at the center that is sort of an unexpected way to be creative at work. And those also are becoming skill sets that executives say, oh, whoa, like what Mark's doing, what Rachel's doing, I need more of that. How do we cultivate that really intentionally? And so it's not the slash and burn, replacing 15 people with AI type of thing. It is a lot more nuanced than that, but certainly being able to do the 200 mil activity for 100 mil instead is something we're seeing really deeply happen.
We only have 5 minutes left, so maybe we go to the last question.
Yeah, I think we had a time call. So this last question, I guess, is for the three of you. Let's look 10 years down the road. What does a media company look like? And what do the current media companies need to do to be relevant in that time? Simon, maybe we'll start with you.
I'll go first? All right. I think what you're seeing already in the last 10 months, right, is an ability for a media company which has been traditionally, we talked about this earlier, very fragmented, super fragile, workflows that were archaic to some degree, like just had never been touched. 10 years might even be too far. I think we'll see it earlier than 10 years, to be perfectly honest. I think we're going to see the media companies become a lot closer to like a hyperscaler to some degree in terms of their tech capacity. Think of a traditional media company today, right, that might just do typical API integration, right, and then just do everything else behind the scenes with a third party. I would imagine a lot more tech capacity comes in the hands of the media companies where they can do more because we've democratized access to those tools and technology through AI, where I can hire different people. I can do things myself. I don't have to rely on someone else to do it for me. And I think we're going to see the speed of creation quadruple. It would just go immensely fast because the quality will get better. And I like to say one thing before I finish. This is as bad as we'll ever see AI. It will only get better, right? And so I think we just need to remember that. And that's going to have an amazing effect on media companies, which have traditionally never been that profitable. And they can use that to do better with data, which I think is going to be a point I'll let May talk about, because I think she's going to talk about data. But I think certainly more data-driven.
Yeah. In so many ways, social media is the future of where media companies will live. You look at like the current set of events happening right now in our region, and everybody is glued to Instagram, for that news. And I agree, 10 years is too far. I think 3 to 5 years. I think we're going to see a lot more. I hope we're not calling them influencers, but I hope we are going to see media companies arise around groups of people who we as humans trust, where we are aligned with their values and their beliefs, using technology to operate, a 5 to 10 person operation like a 1,000-person newsroom. I think we'll see a lot more of that. And through social media, they'll be able to amplify distribution. So it's both. I think the future of media companies looks like a few of these trends coming together, actually.
Yeah, I plus one all this just to just build on it. I think how you define media. So if it's a concept of where I choose to cash in my attention, which is a limited currency, then I think that our view of media will completely change. There's a lot more short form. Because of the ability to create more volume, you're going to have a lot more choice, and therefore the ability to bespoke and target content is going to be monumental. Just kind of how TV did scheduling for you, but this is somebody or an algorithm doing bespoke scheduling for your own consumption habits. I think I agree with content creators being kind of this idea that I follow a celebrity for roles they play versus I follow a person for who they are is a lot more palpable for the newer generation. And I think that fight for attention is going to get very, very intense, and there'll be a lot of consolidation between tech and media to make it happen. So the traditional idea where I go to the movie and 30% of my decision is based on the poster is not going to happen anymore. It's going to be a lot more targeted, a lot more interactive, and the competition for that attention span and therefore the dollar is going to be a lot more intense.
I want to thank you all for bringing a positive spin on AI. Most of the headlines are about doom and gloom, but we've talked about better democratization of content creation. We've talked about media companies either becoming much more capable tech-wise or maybe becoming part of a bigger tech company. We've talked about enterprises getting much more control over their information and how they serve their customers. We've talked about humans remaining relevant as storytellers and also as practitioners in the sector. So I hope that rosy picture is what's the future of the media sector. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.